I'm Livi Redden, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go.
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. The quote for this episode comes from The Alchemist and says, "When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you achieve it." Livi Redden is a powerful voice for Gen Z and young adults everywhere. As an acclaimed author, keynote speaker, and podcast host, Livi is on a mission to equip the next generation with the tools to live happy, resilient, and purpose-driven lives. Her TED Talk has racked up over 2.5 million views, and her debut book, The Sooner You Know the Better, is a life-changing read for young people navigating identity, relationships, and the pressure to figure it all out. Livi's work has reached more than 70 million people, sharing the tools, techniques, and shifts needed to build a life you love. She's been featured in Barstool Sports, Build-A-Bear Radio, and Success Magazine, but today she's here with us. In this episode, we're going to talk about the biggest challenges facing young people today and what to do about them, how to embrace your full self even when the world tells you to shrink, the truth about grief, growth, and finding peace in the hardest moments, and why your future is brighter and more in your hands than you realize. Before we begin, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. So there's a friend or loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day. Share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with my good friend, Livi Redden. Livi, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. You are really good at an intro. That was fantastic. And did you know that The Alchemist is one of my favorite books?
I did know that.
That is one of my favorite quotes of all time.
Yeah.
I read it every year.
I was digging through your book and knowing, you and I have known each other for a long time now, and that's why I'm so grateful that you're here on the show. I feel like this is long overdue, and of course I enjoy any opportunity we get to catch up. So I tried to find a quote from your favorite book that would suit your journey. So I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I was like, wow, is that by chance? Yeah, gotcha.
Well, to kick things off, is there a story of struggle or success from when you were younger that helped put you on the path you ultimately went down?
Yeah, and that's a story I talk about my TED Talk and in my keynote. A lot of it did have to do growing up with a terminally ill parent. And beyond that, my dad was diagnosed with ALS when I was 11, 12. But, there were symptoms long before that. And he passed away when I was 17. And, beyond that, we were very involved in the raising money space. I wasn't just growing up around him. I was growing up around groups of people that were dying. I was going into their homes. I was doing interviews with people that had ALS. We were raising money. We were doing 5K races. And I think it had me asking questions about life and about what I wanted and what things really mattered very early. And there were adverse effects where it also caused, reasonably so, struggles where, being in a house that was in a sort of chronic state of anxiety. I saved my dad's life probably a dozen different times by the time he passed. And it was there was also like an anxious state of being. So I had to learn coping skills to work with that as well. So yeah, I think that was definitely a big piece that put me on that trajectory.
Can you share a little bit about what ALS is? Some people might remember it from the Ice Bucket Challenge that, what year was that? That was probably 2015 or thereabouts. That took the world by storm and raised a lot of awareness, a lot of money for ALS. But for people who don't know, what is it exactly?
Yeah, ALS or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, some people know it as Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a neurodegenerative disease. So essentially what they know, they don't know a lot about it, but the immune system is attacking the nervous system. And basically, as the muscles start to atrophy and die, someone slowly loses their ability to walk and then eat and then eventually breathe. It's been around, or they've known about it for about 150 years, and there still is no treatment or cure that is like actively shown to work. So it really is a death sentence. I mean, when people are given the diagnosis, they give you about 2 to 5 years to live.
And their brain is not affected. Is that right? So they can still communicate quite well if there is a means for them to be able to do that, which makes it, I guess, even more difficult. You have the person who's inside there.
Yes.
Except they have all these physical limitations that come along with it.
Yeah, people really are like prisoners inside their own body where their brain is untapped. I mean, I do think there is a toll that is taken because people often will lose their ability to speak pretty fast because the tongue itself, is a muscle. And, it sounds a little maybe graphic, but like my dad's tongue started to shrivel. And so he lost the ability to speak pretty fast. So I think there's a toll on the mind in the sense that you're stuck in your own head, and, that can drive a person a little crazy.
So what was an average day before the diagnosis, and what did one look like as things started to get pretty serious?
Yeah, before that, me and my sister were always athletes. My dad did work a lot. He was usually working 80, honestly, sometimes like 100 hours a week. Like he would just come home to sleep. And I do think that contributed to him getting sick. He was also a football player, so took a lot of like body trauma. He was a 250-pound, 6'5" guy, like a big guy. But yeah, as like far as our household, he was often working. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she was the one kind of taking us to practices or school events. But my dad also actively tried to like be at games and bring home Krispy Kreme donuts after work, that kind of thing. But at the same time, our house was quite angry. The communication I grew up on was yelling. We all just sort of yelled at each other. So there were things going on before that. But like day in life was like pretty standard, had a lot of the standard like family issues people have.
Every family has their issues.
Yeah. But also my house was really loving. We went to church. I was taught a lot of like help people. My mom was always very unconditionally loving, still is, to the people around her. And so there were so many, like I had so much fun as a kid too. And my parents really allowed for that like free expression. I was a nut. I loved younger me. And then after that, my mom became my dad's 24-hour caregiver, and it was very taxing on her. She couldn't really leave the house almost ever. Like I was doing most of our grocery shopping, like me and my sister, once we could drive. People usually had to like bring us dinners. I never really had like a home cooked meal unless someone else brought it, or I was usually cooking for our family starting at like 8 or 9. Yeah, once he started showing signs, my mom was often having to like, could only do so much, was like supporting my dad trying to figure out what was happening. So I sort of took on the fatherly role in my house, honestly. But yeah, like the day in the life, my mom would just get up, have to like, once he had a trach, had to suction his trach, had to feed him through the feeding tube. If she needed to sleep or needed to like go to a doctor or something, like we had to kind of schedule out who was going to watch my dad. Because, if a battery dies, something get logged in his throat, like he's gone. So there was a big level of responsibility. Just having like bowel movements was like, for him, was like a multiple day thing that we all kind of had to be a part of. It was figuring out CNAs. It was all those things. So I also knew all the skills of like a physical therapist, someone that could work with a trach and ventilator, a nurse, all those things at like a really young age. Like I remember when he got his trach, we had an issue right after he came home from the hospital, and we called 911 and they couldn't do anything. They were just like, well, what would you do? She's like, this is new for me. I thought y'all would know. And then after that happened, the fire department called our house, and I was 14. My sister was 17. And they said, could your daughters come to the station and teach our responders how to deal with someone with a trach and ventilator? And we were like, oh, so people like really can't help us. Like we're really on our own. I know this is sort of a lot of detail, but yeah, it was very complex. Like even if me and my sister, we were just in there were a lot of emergency situations. Like me and my sister might take my dad to a movie, and there was a time where his battery shut off and malfunctioned. So I had to hand pump his lungs on the way home until we could get a new battery for his machine. And like that was just like our way of living, and we tried to like laugh about it as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So
have you been able to identify any lessons or benefits or gifts in that entire experience that you went through?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like in a lot of ways, my whole family is so grateful for that experience. And I think, things can be unfair and it can be tough to like, I wish that didn't happen. But at the same time, it made me very independent and very resilient, and made me reflect on what I wanted out of life. And I had a lot of really cool experiences, like having great conversations with people in the ALS space. And I saw firsthand what true, loving, unconditional service looked like. I mean, our neighbors and church members were at our house, 5 a.m. in the morning before they went to work, like shoveling our snow so that my dad could get into the van, or just like without us asking, bringing us meals, checking in, taking me and my sister to practices. And the people around me and my mom like showed me what unconditional love looks like, and that life is not about me. Mm-hmm. And I'm so, so grateful for all of that.
Was there a part of you that resented the normal teenage life that you saw other people have, that you feel like you might have missed out on at certain stages?
I think at the time, I didn't know what I was experiencing wasn't normal. That's all I knew. So like at the time, I was just like, this is sort of what everyone's experiencing, I guess. And it wasn't till after where I would explain situations to friends or a therapist, and they're like, oh, that's nuts. That's nuts that was occurring. So yeah, I actually don't really think I have resentment. I think there was a level of grief that had to be reckoned with, where I sort of was like, I wish I could have been like cared for more, maybe. Like there was a level of grief I had to work through where I'm like, I wish I could have had my parents in a different capacity, but they really did do the best they could with what happened. And yeah, so I don't think I would change anything. I don't think I had resentment or do, but there was a level of grief for sure.
How did that then plant the seed for you to want to really make it your life's work to go and help teenagers and young adults?
A lot of it had to do with when I was looking for answers as a teenager, looking for direction. A lot of the resources, whether it was like podcasts, books, thought leaders, that sort of thing, weren't really talking to young people specifically. And, we had a few books that were written like a decade ago, like Highly Effective Teens or Defining Decade, like those sort of things. There wasn't much directly to me. I couldn't find any information of other young people that were experiencing a terminally ill parent. So that was the initial idea, was to write a book about that. And I think also it's just like a natural interest. I think it's interesting to see how the mind works and to see how I can create an empowering life for myself and for others, because, time is short, and I would love to make the most out of every moment I have here.
Mm-hmm. And your book, The Sooner You Know, The Better, is a great read. Who do you want someone to be once they finish reading it? And what does that mean exactly? The sooner you know, the better. What do they need to know?
Yeah. When they finish reading it, the biggest thing is I want a level of intention. I don't want people to be panicked, but I do know, and, research supports that as well, that your 20s do matter, and the way your brain is developing in your 20s matter. And there are tools that can alleviate a lot of the confusion, and some of the sort of midlife crisis occurrences can be avoided with a little bit more intention. And there's a quote I love, and it says, it's one thing to stumble mindlessly, because we will stumble, but stumbling intentionally will get you a lot further. And I hope that I can move someone from stumbling mindlessly to stumbling intentionally. And that's what why I called it The Sooner the Better. The title was actually initially How to Turn Up Less Screwed Up Than Your Parents. But people didn't like, the marketers did not like that title. And I was like, fair enough.
I feel like that could have been a hit. I don't hate it. Yeah.
Hey,
maybe you can rebrand at some stage.
I don't know. Maybe it's the next one. But yeah, the sooner you know, the better is, we're at the same time, we're often not given the tools of like, how do you make decisions, or how do you grow habits or create habits and be consistent? How do you know what an aligned and fulfilled life would look like for you specifically? And so that's what I teach. And I really feel like the sooner we can learn those things, the better, because at the same time, like, time is not promised. And I would much rather have someone start living a fulfilling life sooner.
Injecting a bit of urgency. I think it's so good. What are the problems just generally that you see young people struggling with today?
It's such a mixture of things. But the biggest one, and it's not really anything new or specific to this generation, but just a real internal war, like being at war with their own minds and having a hard time. Like so many people, they're worst fear is spending time in their own silence, like in their own mind, in their own body without any distraction. And if we cannot make that, your relationship with yourself is the most important one because it affects how you move about, how you have relationships with others, and getting the tools to have peacefulness in the body and in the mind and in the soul is what so many young people are missing. And then like the phone, social media, or, any sort of like drug use or like over drug use or anything like that is a symptom. It's not the core. And so I don't even necessarily blame anyone. It's just like for decades, for centuries, and I guess I speak on a United States perspective, we are not given those tools, so we find things that will fill the gaps. That's the biggest thing I see. I think Gen Z specifically has some generation-specific stuff because of social media, sometimes a desire to over-label oneself or put ourselves in a box, because if we can make ourselves certain, life can feel less certain. And I think allowing for a little bit more fluidity in how we view ourselves and allowing ourselves to change and change our mind, and that's not a bad thing. So there's levels of that I work with people on. But at the same time, I really love Gen Z and the way Gen Z desires these things. And I feel like I'm in this perfect moment where I do have a generation that is actively seeking these tools and values them and wants really fulfillment and joy over necessarily like just accomplishment. And that really resonates for me. And I like that. And both things are great. Like I'm all for working hard and accomplishment and seeing what you can do. But kind of like you and I talk about where it's, I do think you can have all that.
Mm. How do you feel about high schools? Are they an asset or a liability these days?
Oh, that's interesting. Like public school?
Just school in general, just high schools. Yeah. See, I wouldn't be aware of the differences between a public and a private school for high schools these days.
Yeah.
But it's such an important time in someone's life. And how do you design a curriculum to help someone be resilient, to help them to be happy, to help them nurture relationships, to help them have an understanding of self? It seems that there's an overemphasis on things like the memorization of certain things that in the world of AI, that's completely neutralized. It's like if we're spending hours and hours and hours a week on something like mathematics that AI can now do at the click of a button. It's like, well, is that time well spent? Maybe that's time that could be spent learning things like emotional regulation or relationship building or critical thinking. I didn't mean to pick on mathematics there. It could be be any subject. But
I agree with you. And I do think we're in this sort of educational renaissance in a way where we're seeing that the current system is not really working and that we do need more strength-based curriculums. And, you could really get into that, like teachers are being underpaid and curriculums are getting more intense. But I feel very hopeful in seeing, because I've been on a lot of that nonprofit front and educational revolution where I think we are moving towards a more strength-based education system, but it moves like molasses. Like it's hard to change the way something's always been done. But there is so much benefit in having students focus on their strengths, focus less on grades and where they're quote failing. They've done surveys with thousands of teachers where 70% of students and teachers in high school across the nation, 70% of the time they feel stressed and unhappy at the school, the teachers and the students. And that's not a place to be learning. It stifles the ability to process and learn. There was a school here in LA, one of the lowest performing schools in the district. They brought in simple emotional regulation and self-reflection and decision-making skills, and gang-related violence decreased by 75%. They became the top performing school in the district after being the lowest performing school in the district. And we're seeing more and more that emotional skills are no longer an option. We need those things to be productive and fleshed out and kind human beings, and fostering that in an educational space is part of that.
It's like a core domino that affects so many other things, isn't it? The emotional regulation, which then gives you an understanding of the struggles that other people are going through. It gives you an ability to help other people. You're leading by example. There's so many positives that can come from that. We'll be back with the show shortly. I've got a quick question for you. Are you living up to your potential? It's a question that shapes your family, your business, and your overall happiness every single day. That's why I'm excited to introduce the Win the Day quiz. Head over to winthedayquiz.com right now, answer a few thought-provoking questions, and you'll instantly discover how well you're performing relative to your true potential. And here's the exciting part for our Win the Day family. As a fan of the show, you'll receive a personalized and absolutely free action plan to help you win the day every day. Now, just imagine how transformational the results will be when you consistently show up as the best version of yourself in every aspect of your life. Don't miss out. Take the Win the Day quiz now by visiting winthedayquiz.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show. I want to ask you a two-part question now. First of all is what do young people need to know? And the second one is what do parents need to know? So let's start with young people, with the people that you work with. What do you feel like when they come to you, what do they really need to know?
I think first and foremost, before any advice, they need to know that they're not alone and that they are experiencing normal things and they're not behind and that I love them so much and I'm rooting for them. It's never too late. It's never too late to move into an empowered stance or, not let your circumstance define who you are forever. I think more than anything, they just need to know that it can be different and it's going to be okay. And there's going to be people that want to be a part of that journey, because I do believe, even though we have so much bullshit, just crazy stuff going on here. I do believe in the goodness of humanity. I think most people are good. I really do. I think most people want to help their neighbor. I think most people just want to be able to pay their bills and be with the people they love and just be happy. I think that for the young people where there is hope and it's going to be okay and you're not crazy. The stuff you're experiencing is not crazy or weird or unusual.
I think they're in a uniquely bad situation at times. That's certainly how I felt. It's a very natural human emotion to think, I'm the only one. No one else would have any idea what I'm going through. And it's well, actually, there's a lot of people going through that. If we can just open up or have a bit more awareness of what those feelings are.
Yeah, I think so.
Do the parents understand the battle that their kids are going through, their adult children or their teenage children are going through?
I think it's very situational because I think some parents do, others don't as much. And, it's hard to say because the way that the parent perceives their child often by the way that they were raised. But I do think I do have a lot of young people reach out where they really desire their parents' support. And it makes sense where parents sometimes are pushing their child to the thing that would make their life, in the parent's view, more stable or more so the way the parent would do things, where oftentimes I think young people just need support or to let them fail or let them, respect that the young person has a lot of intuition, both opinions could be right. I think I guess what I would say to parents is that so many young people desire support from their parents to just explore who they are, to navigate life in the way that feels aligned for them. I know that's not easy as a parent, because as a parent, you're I've been through this. Listen to me. I do think I kind of know better, but I think sometimes you got to give them the skills that you think they need to grow up and then let them go after that. And if stuff, of course, sometimes some kids need to be hey, what are you doing? We got to backtrack a little bit. But yeah, I think just supporting them, and maybe sometimes, even if you want to say something, maybe wait a second and let them sort of have their own growth process.
I love that. And the parents are figuring it out as well. No parent is perfect.
It's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems that a lot of parents would like their children to open up a little bit more. They see them stuck in their own head. They're just in this, I don't know if it's apathy or loneliness or just a lack of clarity on who they are. What can parents do to encourage their children to be able to open up a bit more, just have a bit more energy, or to initiate some more of these conversations that need to be had where a lot of that connection can really thrive?
my thought would be, just making sure you're checking in and having open discussions with your kids regularly. But even more than that, it's example. Your kids are taking in everything that you do. It's so much more by example than it is anything you say. And so when a parent is very open, obviously I think there's a level of you definitely should not tell kids everything that you're going through as a parent because they're young and can't take on all that. But I do think, I think sometimes parents will, as far as emotions go, try and hide that from the kid. And then when the parents are saying they're fine, but the kid has this very tapped in feeling, particularly with a parent, where they're like, I don't think so, but I feel like now I'm confused. They're saying they're fine. And so now I don't really trust my intuition as much. So I think as a parent being able to be like, mom had a tough day today and that's okay. If my actions are any different, that's what's going on for me. When the child sees the parent doing that, they then do it by example because not all kids, but a lot of kids look up to their parents. And so when the parent is doing that, they're like, oh, that's what I do because they're being led by example. So I think so much of it comes down to example. And if your child was living the way you were, accepting behavior the way you do, or acting in the way you do, would you like that?
Yeah, people out there who they're trying to dictate to their children what they should do, but their actions are the complete opposite. Do as I say, not as I do. It's hang on a second. You need to be modeling the behaviors for your kids to be able to observe and take on themselves.
Right.
And so much of the work you do now with young people is to help them navigate the next chapter of their life with clarity and confidence. So how would you help someone go through that? Do you have a specific framework that you use? Or for someone who wanted that clarity and confidence for the next chapter, what steps would you take them through?
Yeah, so I teach the BUD framework in my online community and in my book. And the BUD framework, or someone's buddy for the next chapter of their life, and really it can be applicable to anybody. But I do teach it to 20-somethings specifically and teenagers. And the BUD framework is a 3-pillar framework where we go through unlearning, being, and doing. And each of those pillars, after talking to hundreds of young people, help them answer 2 questions, the questions that I get asked the most. And so as I built out this framework, I picked out these 6 questions that I get asked the most and also will provide the most fulfillment and direction. We start with unlearning, which is essentially removing things that are not propelling someone in a aligned, fulfilled direction. And we're answering the questions, how are you holding yourself back? And how is your past holding you back? And removing some of the stuff from the suitcase that is not helpful. And then we go into that being pillar where we're now adding things that will propel them in a better direction. And we're asking the questions, helping answer the question, how do I get clear on who I am and how do I get clear on what I want? And then we go into that doing piece where we're now trying to figure out, now that we've got the tools for them that will be more helpful, how to now move into the world and begin to take action. And we're answering the questions, how do I get to where I want to go? And how do I stay consistent as I head there? And so those are the 6 things that we seek to, I teach skills, and as far as the community goes, bring in experts to help teach those things as well. And work them through a 6-week workshop as well, going through that BUD framework. And then it's also something that I work people through in my keynote as well.
What's the most common thing people need to unlearn? Or perhaps the biggest limiting belief that you see people having?
It makes me think of the question we focus on is, how is my past holding me back? And there's a story I tell in my keynote, and I think a lot of it has to do with unlearning things in your family that have always been done that way, but maybe have not been the best for the family's well-being. And there's a story I tell in my keynote where when I went to go support my grandparents, I live in Oklahoma, just before my Nana passed. She's one of my grandparents I was closest with. And I was sitting, we were helping caregive because I know a lot about caregiving. We were like, we can be there. I know how to caregive. And she had, stage 4 cancer. And I was sitting at her bedside with my grandpa. And he said to me, a few years after your dad passed, I went to his grave and I begged for his forgiveness for how shitty of a father I had been. And he was like, and I just sobbed. And I felt like he was telling me that it was okay and he forgave me. I wish it wouldn't have been at his grave that I did that. And, I asked my grandpa, I wanted to learn more because this was, something that's gone on in my family for generations that, we try and be slightly better than maybe our parent previously. But, I asked him like, what was your relationship with your dad like? And he was like, I didn't know that my dad loved me he didn't say he loved me till I was 42. And when he did, I sobbed. Like, that's what I wanted to hear my whole life. He's like, I never knew if he loved me, and I spent my life wondering if he did. And then, I asked him about how his dad parented him. And he was, his dad would really beat on his kids. It was a really intense, scary household to be in. And so you see these things get passed down and down on such a subconscious level. And everyone ends up having regret over it. And so I think that is the biggest thing where it's like, can we be generational habit breakers of things that are not serving ourselves or our families or our loved ones? And I do believe we can, our brains are very good at doing this, especially if you can do it the sooner the better, rewiring some of these things. And we do have the capacity to maybe do things a little bit differently in a way that serves us and our families and our communities.
Break that cycle of regret.
Yeah.
You are so good at helping other people build a life they love. What do you do to help yourself build a life that you love?
Yeah, a lot. I do a lot. Definitely reflect a lot. And I work hard, but I also give myself moments to reflect on, am I headed where I want to go? Are things coming up that do still need some unlearning? And more than anything, I take real responsibility on where my life is going and how I act. I do think it can be difficult to not feel like a victim of certain things that happen in our lives or feel like things were unfair. But more than anything, it leaves us in a state of disempowerment. And I think you can feel those feelings for a period of time. But for your own sake and for your own potential to move into this feeling of empowerment and responsibility for where we go from here, is one of the most self-loving and self-respecting things we can do. And, just a beautiful show of self-love and self-respect to take responsibility for where we go. And that's what I try to do. I try and take radical responsibility for when I mess up and radical responsibility for when I succeed in ways that I was actively trying to. So yeah, I take a lot of ownership over how I act and what I do and how I think and the way I interact with people.
I love that. Your TED Talk, more than 2.5 million views, so many views, every single day it's got more and more. Stepping into the public eye at such a young age, how did you develop the confidence to be able to do that?
I think I was always a little loud, to be honest with you. As a kid, and I think that did have to do with the way my mom raised me, but I think it was nature and nurture, where I was very much like making businesses, making trading posts on the playground, facilitating flash mobs as a third grader. Like I was always kind of like loud and expressive in that way. As far as confidence in professionally, I think that's been a journey for me as well. When I was able to fully step into my confidence in what I do, is really just through like proof and repetition. I've spent years putting in the work and the time, and I'm very confident in the amount of hours I've spent in the professional gym, I think it has a lot to do with that, and also therapy. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no substitute for doing the right reps, is there? And on the therapy side, having someone who can initiate some questions for you to be able to ask yourself and to open up your awareness to some things that you might not be aware that you're doing. It's so valuable to do that. From the moment you secured a TED Talk booking, what was your definition of success? Like, what did it look like for you with that speaking engagement?
I mean, the TED Talk itself was nuts. They came to me asking me to do it, and that had been a dream of mine since I was probably 16. I was listening to TED Talks daily starting in high school, and I thought it would happen later in my career, to be quite honest. But once I do believe at the same time we aren't handed opportunities most of the time that we aren't ready for. And so I had to remind myself of that. But as far as what I considered success with the TED Talk, I just wanted to deliver something that I was proud of. And I felt like not only expressed my soul, but could reach the soul of people watching it and help people feel seen and heard. And then in the more like tactical and just like putting my best foot forward was really if I did all I could on my part and whatever the views ended up looking like, I couldn't really ask myself much more than that. But as far as a more like tactical piece, it going viral was not just coincidence. I've spent my career also in marketing and creating, viral videos for myself and for companies. There was a lot of work put into that as far as like some of the words or like SEO that I was using. I wrote about 120 titles for the talk before I picked one because I knew how important on YouTube that the title was going to be, because if the cover of your book is not interesting, no one's clicking on it upside down. It doesn't matter how good the information is. And so I spent a lot of time on, or they had you write the description. I spent a lot of time on the copy for the description on how it would rank on YouTube. The blue suit was very intentional. We all know like color. A lot of people know like the color theory with branding. And so all of that was very intentional in the way the talk started, the way to grab attention and keep attention. Like all of that was years of understanding and the ability to talk on camera. Before I did this, in high school and college, I did modeling and acting. And so it was a lot of things, attention that helped with the virality, where I feel like I can sing with my voice and I can be expressive and I can keep an audience engaged. As far as success, there was a lot of intention in allowing for it to go viral as well. And, once the video dropped, I messaged everybody that I knew, because I knew that those first like 72 hours of it on the platform and how many views and likes and comments and engagement it got would really matter, or the algorithm would stop pushing it. So it was the moment they said it dropped, I stopped everything I did for 2 days and emailed everyone, was like posting videos, texted everyone in my contact list. I was like, can you send it to your friends? Can you comment? I was like all in, because also I believe in the message and I wanted people to hear it.
Hey, it worked.
Yeah, it worked.
I think it's so good how openly you've shared the reps that you've taken, the hard work. A lot of people see 150,000 TikTok followers or whatever that you've got. They see a TED Talk with 2.5 million views and they're like, oh, maybe it's easy for someone like Livi to be able to fluke that. But you can't fluke that result. You've got to do the reps. You've got to take the actions. It's all so important. So thank you for sharing all of those steps. For any aspiring TED Talk speakers, you can implement some of the things that Livi has been sharing here. And last question now before the rocket round. On your best day, what's an affirmation that you would write on a flashcard that you could show yourself on your worst day?
A friend of mine that's a manifestation coach. She works with like millionaires, billionaires on money manifestation. She calls it an intention, but a sort of statement that I will say to myself when I'm aspiring to a new goal. And in that statement, it says, I trust that I am creating my life in divine timing. So be it, so it is. And I think about that a lot, where oftentimes when I'm feeling the most stuck or not in a good place, I've lost touch of the trust, and I've left the mindset of so be it, so it is, and I've forgotten that everything has turned out okay up to now. So I think that is what I would write on the flashcard. Everything is happening in divine timing, so be it, so it is.
That's so powerful. understanding the difference between what's urgent versus divine timing, I feel like is something that takes you a long time to get good at. That's where eventually trusting your intuition and making sure you're around the right people and all of that, because even trusting divine timing, it's important to be able to stack the deck as much as you can. Like,
exactly.
To improve your future, you don't get to work on that tomorrow, you get to work on that today. So there are some things that you can be doing today to be able to stack the deck in your favor. So then divine timing can really do its work.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's now move into the Win the Day Rocket Round. 10 questions for some quick answers. You up for this one, Livy?
I'm ready.
Number 1, what quote inspires you the most?
I had a conversation with Dr. Jeff Spencer, and I still have that, something he said to me, which I kind of created my own quote around it in a moment when I was very stuck, that I still have it as my screensaver, is honor the calling, follow the path, show up for duty. And I still have that as my screensaver. And I look at that a lot because that's
So
advice
good.
I need.
Yeah, so good. I think we all need that. It's amazing. Number 2, morning coffee or evening wine?
Coffee, for sure, yeah.
Number 3, what's one bit of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
Keep doing what you're doing, honestly. She was pretty in tune and knew what was up, so...
Ahead of her time.
Probably just that, yeah.
Number 4, what book do you gift the most or that contributed most to the mindset you have today?
I do love The Alchemist, as I mentioned, and I love that every time I read it, I get something different out of it. Obviously, I gift my book a lot. I also really enjoyed the book, 2 other books. I know you only asked for 1. Time Management for Mortals. I forget who it's by. I think it's so good and grounded and takes something like, I really love the book Atomic Habits, but I think Time Management for Mortals has it just works better for me, and it's got a little bit more of like a grounded human approach. And then also the book Permission to Feel by Dr. Mark Brackett. He's the creator of the Emotional Intelligence Research Center at Yale. And it has a lot of the research and backing of everything that I do. I get a lot of my the neuroscience and research of what I do from the Yale Research Center.
Awesome. Number 5, was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
I think there were often times in my life where I felt very unusual. Growing up in Utah and where I grew up, I looked very different from the people around me. A lot of people around me were, shorter, blonde hair, blue eyes, and a little bit more feminine. I had a little bit more of a masculine energy. I was 6 feet tall, curly hair, red hair. The more I've embraced everything that makes me unique and interesting, whether it's physically, like wearing heels, dressing the way I enjoy dressing. And on top of that, just not hiding things that I feel strongly about and being there's a quote I really like, and it says, enthusiasm is a form of social courage, and being very enthusiastic unapologetically of the things that light me up.
Number 6, what's one thing you've learned about failure?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that the universe really exists in this energy of duality, and the darker the moment gets, if I can continue and also be willing to pivot and ask for help when needed, that the beauty will be equal opposite reaction, like just as intense. And yeah, I think I've really noticed that about failure when things get the rockiest, I'm like, oh, the payout's going to be good. Yeah.
I love that. Number 7, if you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone alive or dead, who would it be?
I am a big lover of ancestry. A lot of what I do, I know a lot of the stories and read of a lot of journals of my ancestors, visited their homes in Ireland and Samoa. And I have so much respect for the things that my ancestors went through to allow me to do what I do. And so I would love to have conversations, especially with some of the women, it's like badass women that I come from that just like so cool. I would love to sit down and have conversations with some of my like great grandmas and aunts.
Number 8, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business?
I would say in my business, I have mentioned this to you, Sensama is a great time management software, and I really enjoy it. Also, I use Airtable a lot just to keep things organized. And then in my life, I my journaling is through Otter AI, and I record myself talking, and it helps me emotionally process and reflect. And then I can go back, it'll transcribe it for me, and I can go back and look at things I was going through or experiencing. And I use that as my journaling.
Number 9, share one thing on your bucket list.
I have a real love for stars. And when I was a teenager, after my dad passed, me and my mom took a trip to New Zealand and went to a dark sky reserve where there's like no light pollution, and you could see the entire Milky Way just with the naked eye. And there's a handful of those throughout the world. And I would love to travel to some more dark sky reserves, because it's just like, I think it's the closest you can get to that effect that astronauts have when they're out in space and they see the Earth from above. I think those dark sky reserves are some of the closest you can get to, or even like when I went skydiving, or some of the closest things you can get to that feeling. So more dark sky reserve visits.
And final question, number 10, what's one thing you do to win the day?
I pay attention to my priorities. The 3 things I prioritize the most are my work, the art of creation, and my relationships and connection. And so each day I try to reflect on, am I prioritizing those things in the way that I would like?
Love it. Well, there are a bunch of ways to connect with Livi, and we'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow her on Instagram at Livi Redden, visit her website, liviredden.com, and grab a copy of her book on Amazon. And if you're a young adult looking for some support, you can join Livi's online community. All that and more will be linked in the show notes. Livi, what a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was fantastic.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.